3 weeks passed. Captain Jake Morrison stood on his ship and watched a beautiful blue and green planet get bigger in front of him. This was Zalari Prime, the home world of Ambassador Vex's people. Behind Jake, his team was getting ready for what might be the strangest war in human history. "Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Clark from her seat at the communication controls, "the Zalari Defense Fleet is calling us. They sound confused about our ship." Jake was not surprised. His ship, the UES Defiance, did not look like a warship at all. Most space people built their ships to look clean and smooth and to do one job very well. Human ships were built to change and adapt. The Defiance looked more like a construction platform than a destroyer. It had parts sticking out everywhere, backup systems for the backup systems, and way too many escape pods. "Put them on the screen, Lieutenant." The main screen changed to show Admiral Kresh of the Zalari Defense Fleet. The alien had 4 eyes, like Ambassador Vex, and they moved around as he looked at the human bridge. He saw the small rooms, the extra control panels everywhere, and the crew members who seemed too relaxed for people going to war. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Kresh said in a polite but doubtful voice, "we were expecting something different. Your ship looks like a transport vessel, and your crew appears to be very small." "Our crew is exactly what you need, Admiral," Jake replied. "Let me introduce you to Earth's contribution to your war." Jake pointed to his team members one by one. "Lieutenant Amy Clark handles communications and psychological warfare. Sergeant Ben Parker is our explosives expert and creative problem solver. Dr. Lisa Wells is our field medic and biochemist. Commander Ryan Stone is our tactical consultant and former Special Forces operator." Each human nodded when Jake said their name. Admiral Kresh noticed how different they all looked from each other. Unlike many space species that all looked almost the same, humans came in many different shapes and sizes and seemed to be good at many different things. "With respect, Captain," Admiral Kresh said carefully, "the Korthak fleet that destroyed the Talani system had 300 warships. How exactly do 5 humans plan to fight against that?" Before Jake could answer, loud alarms started ringing throughout the Zalari ship. "Admiral!" shouted a voice from the alien communication officer. "Korthak scout ships, 6 of them coming out of hyperspace. They are heading straight for us." Jake watched the alien bridge turn into controlled panic. Orders were shouted, weapons were charged, and defensive formations were called out. Standard military procedure, exactly what the Korthak would expect them to do. "Admiral Kresh," Jake said calmly, "I request permission to engage the enemy." "Captain, with respect, you have 1 ship against 6 of theirs." "Admiral," Commander Ryan Stone interrupted, stepping forward with a smile that made several Zalari officers step back. "You asked what 5 humans could do against an empire. You are about to find out why the galaxy learned to be afraid of us." The Defiance broke away from the Zalari formation. It accelerated toward the approaching Korthak scouts in a pattern that made no sense to Admiral Kresh. Instead of staying far away to use their weapons at long range, the human ship was moving in close for what looked like a suicide attack. "What are they doing?" Admiral Kresh said quietly, watching the tactical display with confusion. On the Defiance, Jake's crew worked with the smooth efficiency that came from years of training for impossible situations. "Amy, start broadcasting on all Korthak frequencies. I want every ship in this system to hear what happens next." "Ryan, you have tactical command. Show our new friends what humans do to bullies." Commander Stone's smile got bigger as he watched the approaching Korthak vessels. They were maintaining perfect formation, following textbook assault patterns, doing exactly what centuries of military training told them to do. That was their first mistake. "Ben," Ryan called out, "remember that little project you have been working on? The one that Command said was too unpredictable for military use?" Sergeant Parker's face lit up with excitement. "Oh, you mean the Murphy's Law torpedo? The one that randomly changes its target in the middle of flight?" "That is the one. Load 6 of them." Admiral Kresh watched in growing confusion as the human ship fired 6 missiles that immediately began flying in crazy, seemingly random patterns. The Korthak ships, expecting normal guided missiles, turned on their standard countermeasures and continued their approach. The first torpedo suddenly turned around, looped around 2 Korthak ships, and crashed into the third one from behind. The second torpedo appeared to break down, spinning wildly before apparently targeting a completely different ship than the one it was aimed at. The third torpedo split into smaller warheads that attacked 3 different targets at the same time. 30 seconds. The perfect Korthak formation was complete chaos. Ships crashed into each other while trying to avoid the unpredictable missiles. Commanders shouted orders that contradicted each other. Their tactical computers gave up trying to calculate intercept courses for weapons that seemed to have no logical behavior. The beauty of human military technology, Jake explained to the shocked Admiral Kresh, is that we design it the same way we live our lives. Adaptable, unpredictable, and absolutely refusing to do what anyone expects us to do. The last Korthak scout ship, the only one that had avoided destruction, ran away back to hyperspace. It carried a message that would soon spread throughout the Empire. The humans had arrived, and nothing they knew about warfare worked anymore. Admiral Kresh stared at the tactical display where the wreckage of 5 Korthak ships was floating in space. One human ship had destroyed 5 enemy vessels in less than a minute, using weapons that seemed to break every rule of space combat. "How did you do that?" he asked. Dr. Lisa Wells looked up from her medical station. "Admiral, humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We learned something important. The side that can adapt fastest usually wins. The Korthak Empire has been winning because they do the same thing every time," Sergeant Ben Parker explained while checking his equipment. "They show up with more ships and bigger guns. Everyone expects that, so everyone prepares for that. But what happens when someone does something completely unexpected?" Lieutenant Amy Clark asked. "What happens when the enemy cannot predict what you are going to do next?" Commander Ryan Stone turned from the tactical display. "What happens is chaos, Admiral, and humans are very good at using chaos as a weapon." Jake nodded toward the wreckage outside. Those Korthak ships were destroyed because their commanders could not adapt to a new situation. They followed their training. They did what they were supposed to do, and they died because of it. Admiral Kresh was beginning to understand something that frightened him. "You are saying that the Korthak Empire's strength is also their weakness?" "Every empire's strength is also their weakness," Jake replied. "The Korthak are so used to winning with overwhelming force that they do not know what to do when force does not work." Dr. Wells smiled. "Admiral, we spent 3 weeks studying everything we could find about Korthak tactics, Korthak psychology, and Korthak weaknesses. Do you know what we discovered?" "What?" "They have never faced an enemy that fights the way humans fight. They have never faced an enemy that treats every rule as a suggestion and every impossible situation as a challenge." Lieutenant Clark was monitoring communications from across the system. "Admiral, that surviving scout ship is already sending reports back to the main Korthak fleet. They are telling their commanders that humans use weapons that do not follow any known patterns." "Good," Jake said. "Let them worry about it. Fear of the unknown is one of our best weapons." Admiral Kresh looked around at the 5 humans on the bridge. They were all calm, all confident, all acting like destroying 5 enemy ships was just another day at work. "What happens when the main Korthak fleet arrives? They will have hundreds of ships." Jake's smile was the same one that had worried Admiral Kresh from the beginning. "Admiral, you are still thinking like everyone else the Korthak have conquered. You are thinking about ship counts and weapon strength and traditional tactics. How should I be thinking?" "Think about this," Commander Stone said. "What happens to an empire that has never lost a war when they suddenly cannot win battles? What happens to soldiers who have always followed orders when their orders stop making sense?" Sergeant Parker finished his equipment check and looked up. Admiral, in 3 days, the Korthak are going to face the most dangerous enemy they have ever encountered. Not because we have better ships or bigger guns, but because we fight wars differently than anyone else in the galaxy. Dr. Wells added, and because humans never give up, even when we should. Especially when we should, the communication system activated with an incoming message. Captain Morrison, came Admiral Kresh's voice, the main Korthak fleet has been detected. 300 ships approaching our system. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Jake looked at his team. They all nodded. Admiral Kresh, please prepare your people for something they have never seen before. The Korthak Empire is about to get their first real lesson about humans. What kind of lesson? The kind that changes everything. The Korthak High Command received the scout ship's report with the cold analysis that had conquered 17 civilizations. Grand Admiral Thex reviewed the tactical data on his command dreadnought, the pride of Korthak, while his strategic council waited for his assessment. Grand Admiral Thex was old, even by Korthak standards. His dark shell showed the scars of 200 successful campaigns. His forearms moved with mechanical precision as he studied the holographic displays showing the destruction of his scout ships. Unconventional weapons, Thex concluded, his voice carrying the authority of countless victories. The humans use chaos as a tactic, but chaos cannot stand against order and discipline. Deploy the 47th Assault Fleet. 300 ships will overwhelm whatever surprises these primitives can create. What Grand Admiral Thex did not understand was that humans had been preparing for galactic warfare long before they left their home system. Not by building bigger ships or more powerful weapons, but by studying every conflict they could find and learning one simple lesson. The side that adapts fastest usually wins. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the newly established command center on Zalari Prime, surrounded by holographic displays showing the approaching Korthak fleet. The past week had been spent in intense preparation, but not the kind Admiral Kresh had expected. "Report, Commander Stone," Jake said. Ryan looked up from a tactical display that showed what appeared to be complete disorder. Human teams were scattered across the Zalari system with no apparent coordination or central command structure. To any traditional military observer, it looked like a complete breakdown in organization. All teams are in position and have confirmed their local objectives, Ryan reported. Dr. Wells has finished her analysis of Korthak biology. Sergeant Parker has distributed his care packages throughout the system. Lieutenant Clark has established what she calls the network. Admiral Kresh, who had been watching the human preparations with growing confusion, finally spoke up. "Captain Morrison, I must express my concern. Your forces appear to be scattered randomly throughout our system with no strategic coordination. The Korthak fleet will arrive in 16 hours with overwhelming numerical superiority." Jake smiled, and Admiral Kresh was beginning to recognize that expression as a warning sign. "Admiral, you are thinking like every other species the Korthak have conquered. You are planning to meet them in space, ship against ship, following rules of engagement that everyone understands. That is how space combat works, Captain." "Not when humans are involved," Lieutenant Amy Clark said, looking up from her communications console. "Admiral, we spent the last week talking to every civilian ship, every mining platform, every research station, and every maintenance crew in your system. We created something the Korthak have never faced before." "What exactly?" Dr. Lisa Wells answered while reviewing her biological analyses. "A completely militarized civilian population, armed with weapons specifically designed to exploit Korthak weaknesses. Admiral, your people have been peaceful for so long that you forgot something important. Anyone can be a soldier if they are fighting for something worth dying for." Sergeant Ben Parker grinned from where he was reviewing his explosive devices. "And anyone can be dangerous if they are creative enough with common materials. Admiral, do you know what you can do with industrial-grade mining charges if you modify their detonation patterns?" Admiral Kresh was beginning to understand why the galaxy whispered about humans. You turned our entire system into a weapon. Not a weapon, Jake corrected. A nightmare. The Korthak are about to face something they have never encountered. A species that refuses to fight fair, refuses to surrender, and refuses to let anyone else surrender either. The first Korthak ships entered the Zalari system exactly on schedule, expecting to face the remnants of the Zalari defense fleet in traditional formation. Instead, they found empty space. Grand Admiral Thex studied the tactical displays with growing suspicion. Where is their fleet? Scattered throughout the system, sir, his tactical officer reported. No central formation, no apparent command. Structure. It appears they are attempting to use guerrilla tactics. Thex's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. Desperation. Order the fleet to advance. We will crush their scattered forces one by one. The Korthak fleet moved deeper into the system in perfect formation, their sensors searching for targets. They found them everywhere. Civilian mining ships that had been retrofitted with military-grade weapons opened fire from positions that made no tactical sense. Industrial platforms that should have been evacuated instead launched Sergeant Parkers. Modified mining charges, which behaved nothing like conventional explosives. Maintenance pods that were too small to carry significant weapons somehow produced devastating attacks that seemed to come from nowhere. But the real nightmare began when Lieutenant Clark's network activated. Every civilian communication array, every entertainment broadcast system, every emergency alert network in the Zalari system suddenly came alive with human voices. The Korthak fleet found themselves surrounded not just by enemies, but by something they had never experienced. Psychological warfare designed by a species that had perfected the art of getting inside their opponents' heads. Attention, Korthak. Fleet! Amy's voice echoed through space on all frequencies, impossible to block or ignore. Welcome to Zalari space. You are now participating in a human-designed military exercise. Please note that all previous rules of engagement have been suspended. Survival is optional. Retreat is recommended. Resistance is futile. The message was followed by something that chilled every Korthak commander to their core. Laughter. Human laughter, broadcasting from hundreds of sources throughout the system, creating an audio environment that turned their previously safe command bridges into echo chambers of an alien emotion they did not understand. On the pride of Korthak, Grand Admiral Thex felt something he had not experienced in 2 centuries of conquest: uncertainty. "Cut those transmissions," he ordered. "Sir, we cannot. They are broadcasting from civilian infrastructure throughout the system. To stop them, we would have to destroy every communication array, every entertainment system, every emergency beacon. In Zalari space." "Then do it." "Sir, that would take hours, and we would have to split our forces to reach all the sources." Thex realized what the humans had done. By using the Zalari civilian infrastructure, they had turned the entire system into a psychological weapon. Every ship in his fleet was now surrounded by voices and sounds designed to create fear and confusion. "Sir," another officer reported, "we are detecting weapons fire from multiple sources, but the attacks do not follow any recognizable pattern." On the tactical display, Thex watched his fleet being attacked by what appeared to be random targets, using incomprehensible tactics. Mining ships attacked heavy cruisers with weapons that should not have been able to penetrate their armor. Industrial platforms launched projectiles that changed direction mid-flight. Maintenance pods appeared and disappeared from sensor readings like ghosts. "How many ships have we lost?" Thex demanded. 17 destroyed, sir. But that is not the problem." "What is the problem?" "Sir, our formation integrity is collapsing. Ship commanders are reporting that they cannot maintain standard tactical patterns when they cannot predict where the next attack will come from." Thex watched his perfect formation begin to break apart as individual ship captains started making independent decisions based on local threats that defied all military logic. Restore formation discipline immediately. Sir, the ship commanders are requesting permission to engage in individual defensive actions. They say that standard formation tactics are ineffective against these unpredictable attacks. For the first time in 200 years of conquest, Grand Admiral Thex was watching his fleet lose cohesion not because of superior enemy firepower, but because of confusion and fear. Sir, the communications officer interrupted, we are receiving a transmission from the human vessels. Captain Jake Morrison's voice filled the Korthak command bridge, calm and conversational. Grand Admiral Thex, this is Captain Morrison of, the human expedition. We have been monitoring your fleet's performance, and we thought you might appreciate some feedback. Thex's mandibles clicked with rage. Human, you face the might of the Korthak Empire. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Jake's response carried a tone that chilled every Korthak on the bridge. Amusement. Admiral, that is very generous of you, but I am afraid we are going to have to decline. You see, humans have a saying, never pick a fight with someone who has nothing left to lose. The problem is, that is exactly what you have done. We have lost 17 ships, Thex replied. You have accomplished nothing. Admiral, came Dr. Wells's voice over the communication system. We have been studying your fleet's behavior for the past 6 hours. Do you know what we discovered? What? Your ships are designed to fight in formation against enemies that follow predictable patterns. But what happens when the enemy refuses to follow any patterns at all? What happens when every engagement is different from the last one? Sergeant Parker's voice joined the conversation. Admiral, we have been watching your ship commanders try to adapt to our tactics. They are very good soldiers, but they have been trained to follow rules. What happens when there are no rules? Lieutenant Clark's voice was cheerful and terrifying as the battle for the Zalari system had been going on for 12 hours. Grand Admiral Thex was feeling something he had never felt in 2 centuries of conquest. Confusion that was turning into fear. The tactical displays showed his fleet scattered throughout the system, fighting in dozens of separate battles that followed no pattern he could understand. Status report, he commanded from the bridge of the Pride of Korthak. Sir, we have lost 63 ships, his tactical officer reported. The young Korthak's voice was strained from hours of trying to make sense of the chaos. But the enemy losses are difficult to count. Explain. Sir, they do not appear to be using regular warships. Our sensors detect weapons fire from civilian, vessels, industrial platforms, even what appears to be modified escape pods. When we destroy one target, 3 more appear from different locations. Thex studied the holographic display, watching red dots representing his ships disappear while new enemy contacts appeared constantly. It was like fighting a creature that grew stronger each time it was wounded. Sir, his communications officer interrupted. We are receiving another transmission from the human vessels. Captain Jake Morrison's voice filled the Korthak command bridge, calm and friendly. Grand Admiral Thex, this is Captain Morrison. We have been watching your fleet's performance for the past 12 hours, and we thought you might want to know how you are doing. Thex's mandibles clicked with rage. Human, you may have surprised us with your chaos tactics, but chaos cannot defeat order and discipline forever. We still have over 200 ships. Jake's response carried that same tone of amusement that was starting to make every Korthak nervous. Admiral, you are absolutely right about one thing. Chaos cannot defeat order and discipline. That is why we are not using chaos anymore. On the human command ship, Dr. Lisa Wells looked up from her analysis station. Jake, the biological warfare packages are ready for deployment. The Korthak respiratory systems are more vulnerable than we initially calculated. Admiral Kresh, who had been watching the human operation with growing amazement and horror, spoke up. Dr. Wells, surely you are not planning to use biological weapons? Lisa smiled, but there was something predatory in her expression that made the alien admiral step back. Admiral, humans learned a long time ago that the best way to defeat an enemy is to make them defeat themselves. We are not using biological weapons. We are using something much more effective, biology. She gestured to her display, which showed the chemical composition of standard Korthak ship atmosphere. Sergeant Parker's mining charges are not just explosives. They are delivery systems for a completely harmless biological compound that has an interesting effect on Korthak physiology. What kind of effect? It makes them itch, Ben Parker said with a grin that would have worried anyone who knew humans. Well, uncontrollably, unstoppably, impossibly itch. Not dangerous, not lethal, just incredibly, completely distracting. Admiral Kresh stared at the humans in disbelief. You are using itching powder as a weapon of war? Admiral, Commander Ryan Stone said, not looking up from his tactical display. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We learned that the most effective weapons are not always the most obvious ones. A soldier who cannot stop scratching cannot fight effectively. But that is not the real genius of what we are doing, Lieutenant Amy Clark added, monitoring communications across the Korthak fleet. The real genius is that we are not just making them itch. We are making them think. Think about what? Dr. Wells explained while reviewing her biological data. Admiral, the Korthak Empire has been successful because their soldiers never question orders. They do what they are told to do when they are told to do it, exactly the way they were trained to do it. But what happens, Jake asked, when following orders becomes physically uncomfortable? What happens when a soldier has to choose between obeying commands and dealing with personal discomfort? Throughout the Korthak fleet, the effects of the human strategy were becoming apparent. Ship after ship reported the same problem. Crews, becoming increasingly distracted by an uncontrollable physical irritation that made concentration impossible. Tactical decisions were delayed, firing solutions became inaccurate, and coordination between ships began to break down. But the real genius of the human approach was not in any single tactic. It was in the cumulative effect of dozens of small, seemingly unimportant disruptions that combined to create a cascade of failure. Sir, the Korthak tactical officer reported, his voice now openly strained. The 7th Squadron is reporting complete loss of formation coherence. The 12th Squadron has lost communication with half their ships. And, sir, the crews are requesting permission to evacuate their vessels. Grand Admiral Thex felt something he had never experienced in 2 centuries of conquest, doubt about his own forces. Evacuate? Why? Sir, they report that their ships have become uninhabitable. On the human command ship, Lieutenant Amy Clark was monitoring Korthak communications with the satisfied expression of a professional who was very good at her job. Jake, their morale is collapsing faster than we calculated. I am intercepting reports of crew rebellions, ships refusing orders, and several vessels requesting permission to surrender. How many ships have we actually destroyed? Jake asked. 21, Ryan reported. Admiral Kresh looked at the tactical display in amazement. 21 ships destroyed, but their entire fleet is falling apart. How is this possible? Jake turned to the alien admiral with an expression that was becoming familiar, the look of a human who was about to explain something that would change how the universe worked. Admiral, most species fight wars by destroying their enemies. Humans fight wars by convincing their enemies to destroy themselves. I do not understand. Dr. Wells looked up from her biological analysis. Admiral, every species the Korthak have conquered fought them the same way. Ship against ship, weapon against weapon, trying to match their strength with superior strength. But humans learned something important during our own history. The strongest army in the world can be defeated by an enemy that refuses to fight the battle the army is prepared for. Commander Stone pointed to his tactical display. Admiral, look at what is happening to the Korthak fleet. They came here expecting to fight a traditional space battle. Instead, they are fighting dozens of individual encounters against enemies. They cannot predict, using weapons they do not understand, while dealing with physical and psychological pressures they have never experienced. Sergeant Parker was checking his remaining equipment with professional satisfaction. Admiral, humans spent thousands of years learning how to fight enemies that were bigger, stronger, and better equipped than we were. We learned that you do not beat a superior enemy by matching their strengths. You beat them by attacking their weaknesses. What weaknesses? Their predictability, Amy Clark replied, listening to more intercepted Korthak communications. The Korthak Empire has been so successful for so long that they never learned how to adapt when their standard tactics do not work. Dr. Wells nodded toward her analysis screens. Admiral, we spent 3 weeks studying everything we could find about Korthak psychology, Korthak military doctrine, and Korthak social structure. Do you know what we discovered? What? They are very good at following orders, but they are terrible at making independent decisions. They are excellent at coordinated attacks, but they panic when coordination breaks down. They are superb soldiers when everything goes according to plan, but they do not know what to do when the plan stops working. The truth was becoming clear to Admiral Kresh as he watched the tactical display. The humans had not just brought weapons to the war. They had brought something far more dangerous, the accumulated wisdom of a species that had been fighting impossible wars and winning them for thousands of years. Captain Morrison, came Grand Admiral Thex's voice over the communication system, and for the first time it carried a note of uncertainty. What do you want? Jake's response was immediate and final. Admiral, we want you to leave Zalari space. We want you to never come back. And we want you to spread a message throughout your empire. What message? That the galaxy has new protectors now, that there are people who will stand up to bullies no matter how big they are, and that we do not fight fair, we do not give up, and we do not let anyone hurt people who cannot protect themselves. There was a long silence from the Korthak fleet. Then Grand Admiral Thex spoke again, and his voice carried the weight of a man who was seeing the end of everything he thought he understood about war. Human, you have defeated the 47th Assault Fleet without destroying it. You have turned our own strengths against us. You have made our soldiers question their orders and our commanders doubt their decisions. Yes, Jake replied simply. How? Because that is what humans do, Admiral. When someone asks us for help, we help them. And when someone tries to hurt people we are protecting, we stop them. By any means necessary. The communication ended, leaving Grand Admiral Thex alone with a decision that would define the rest of his life and the future of his empire. Around him, the bridge crew waited for orders that he realized he was no longer qualified to give. For the first time in 2 centuries, the Korthak Empire was learning what it felt like to. Grand Admiral Thex stood alone on the bridge of the Pride of Korthak, staring at a tactical display that showed something he had never seen in 2 centuries of conquest: complete defeat. Not the glorious defeat of overwhelming odds or superior firepower, but the slow, inevitable collapse of everything he thought he understood about warfare. 87 ships of his fleet were completely disabled, their crews either evacuated or unable to function due to what the humans casually called discomfort measures. Another 100 ships had reported various levels of system failures, crew disorders, or equipment malfunctions that made no logical sense. The remaining ships were scattered throughout the Zalari system, engaged in individual conflicts with an enemy that seemed to grow stronger instead of weaker when attacked. Sir, his communications officer said, his voice carrying the strain of the past 18 hours. We are receiving another transmission from the human commander, Captain Jake. Morrison appeared on the main screen, but he was no longer aboard his ship. Behind him, Thex could see the interior of what appeared to be a Korthak vessel, with human and Zalari personnel working side by side at control stations that should have been impossible for aliens to operate. Grand Admiral, Jake said, his tone friendly and conversational. I wanted to show you something interesting. The screen shifted to show a view of the battle from space. But the perspective was wrong. The image was being transmitted from somewhere within the Korthak fleet formation, showing their own ships from an angle that should have been impossible. "What you are seeing," Jake continued, "is the view from the KIS Dominator, one of your own heavy cruisers. The crew voted to surrender about 2 hours ago. It turns out that when you give people a choice between fighting to the death for an empire that sees them as expendable and working together to build something better, they make pretty predictable decisions." Thex felt something cold spreading through his body. "Impossible. Korthak crews are loyal to the Empire." "Admiral," came a new voice, and Thex recognized it as Commander Zek of the Dominator. "The humans showed us something we had never seen before. Hope. They showed us that there was another way to live than in constant conquest and fear." Jake's image returned to the screen. "Admiral, here is what is going to happen. Your fleet is going to withdraw from Zalari space. You are going to return to Korthak territory and deliver a message to your leadership. The galaxy has new protectors now, and we operate by different rules." "What rules?" Thex asked, though he was beginning to suspect he would not like the answer. "Simple ones," Jake replied. "We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We stand up to bullies regardless of how big they are. And we never, ever give up." Dr. Lisa Wells stepped into view behind Jake. "Admiral, we have been analyzing your empire's expansion patterns for the past week. We have identified 47 species that the Korthak Empire has conquered or subjugated. We are going to visit each of them." "To do what?" "To give them the same choice we gave your crew on the Dominator," Commander Ryan Stone said, joining the group. "To show them that they do not have to live in fear anymore." Sergeant Ben Parker grinned at the alien admiral. "And if any Korthak forces want to try to stop us, well, we have a lot more ideas we have not tried yet." Lieutenant Amy Clark's voice joined the conversation from off-screen. "Admiral, we have been monitoring communications throughout your empire. Word of what happened here is already spreading. Ship crews are asking questions. Conquered populations are starting to hope. Your empire is about to face something it has never dealt with before, people who refuse to stay conquered." Grand Admiral Thex stared at the humans on his screen, finally understanding what he was truly facing. This was not just a military defeat. It was the beginning of something that would transform the galaxy. "You are declaring war on the entire Korthak Empire," he said. Jake's expression grew serious. "No, Admiral. We are declaring peace, but we are going to enforce it with everything we have." The transmission ended, leaving Thex alone with a decision. That would define the rest of his life and the future of his empire. Around him, the bridge crew waited for orders that he realized he was no longer qualified to give. On the human command ship, Admiral Kresh watched the tactical display as the Korthak fleet began to withdraw from Zalari space. Ship after ship disengaged from combat and moved toward the hyperspace jump points, but they were not fleeing in the chaotic retreat he had expected. They were withdrawing in formation, carrying with them something far more dangerous than any weapon, an idea. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Kresh said, "what have you done?" Jake looked at the alien admiral with an expression that combined satisfaction, determination, and something that might have been sadness. "Admiral, we have done what humans always do when someone asks us for help. We have given them everything we have. But the Korthak Empire spans thousands of worlds. They command millions of ships. What you have accomplished here is impressive, but how can 5 humans change an entire empire?" "Admiral," Dr. Wells interrupted gently, "you are still thinking in terms of ships and weapons and traditional military power, but that is not what this was about." Commander Stone nodded toward the tactical display, where the last Korthak ships were disappearing into hyperspace. "Those ships are not just carrying defeated soldiers back to their empire, they are carrying stories. Stories about humans who could not be intimidated, who turned their own weaknesses into strengths, who refused to accept that the strong should prey on the weak. Lieutenant Clark looked up from her communications station. Admiral, we are already receiving transmissions from 23 different systems in Korthak space. Resistance groups, conquered populations, even Korthak military units that want to know if the stories they are hearing are true. Sergeant Parker was cleaning his equipment with the satisfied air of a professional who had done good work. Admiral, humans learned something important during our own history. You can conquer a people, but you cannot conquer an idea. And the idea that things can be better, that people do not have to live in fear, that someone will stand up for those who cannot. Stand up for themselves, that is the most dangerous weapon in the universe. Admiral Kresh stared at the humans, finally beginning to understand what he had witnessed. You did not just defeat the Korthak fleet. You defeated the idea of the Korthak Empire. Jake nodded. Admiral, 3 months ago, your people sent out a desperate call for help. You asked for ships, for weapons, for technology. But that is not what you needed. What did we need? You needed someone to prove that the impossible was possible. You needed someone to show you that no enemy is too strong if you are fighting for something worth dying for. You needed someone to remind you that hope is the most powerful force in the universe. Dr. Wells smiled as she reviewed the messages pouring in from across the galaxy. And Admiral, that is what humans do. When someone cries for help, Earth answers. Not with the weapons they think they need, but with the one thing that can never be defeated, the human spirit. As the last Korthak ship disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with it the seeds of an empire's transformation, the crew of the Defiance began preparing for their next mission, because across the galaxy, there were other voices calling for help, other bullies that needed to be stopped, other people who needed to be reminded that they were not alone. Admiral Kresh watched the humans work and realized something that changed his understanding of the universe. Captain Morrison, when Ambassador Vex first came to Earth, he asked for your most advanced weapons. What he received was something far more dangerous than any technology. What was that, Admiral? He received humans who cared more about helping others than about their own safety. He received people who would travel across the galaxy to fight, an empire they had never heard of to protect people they had never met. Jake smiled. Admiral, that is not our most dangerous characteristic. That is just who we are. Then what is your most dangerous characteristic? Lieutenant Amy Clark answered while monitoring the continuing flood of communications from across Korthak space. Admiral, our most dangerous characteristic is that we never give up. When humans decide to help someone, we keep helping them until the job is done, no matter how long it takes. Commander Ryan Stone looked up from his tactical analysis. Admiral, the Korthak Empire has existed for over 1,000 years. It has conquered 47 different species. It has never lost a war or retreated from a system. And now? Admiral Kresh asked. Now it is going to learn what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, Sergeant Parker said with a grin. Except in this case, humans are both the unstoppable force and the immovable object. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the stars through the main viewport. The ship was old, built 20 years ago when humanity first started exploring beyond their solar system. Most people called it outdated. The newer ships had better weapons, stronger shields, and faster engines, but Jake loved his ship. He knew every bolt and wire in her hull. The Defiance was on patrol duty near the outer rim of human space. It was quiet work, mostly checking on mining stations and trade routes. Jake's crew had been together for 3 years now. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Parker ran the weapons systems. She was smart and quick, always thinking 2 steps ahead. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh kept the old engines running smooth. He could fix anything with spare parts and determination. Dr. Susan Bell took care of the crew's health and treated anyone who got hurt. Communications specialist Ryan Torres handled all the messages that came and went from the ship. The bridge was calm that
morning.
Torres sat at his station listening to the usual chatter between ships and stations. Parker checked the weapon systems like she did every day. Walsh was down in the engine room, making sure everything worked right. Dr. Bell was in the medical bay, updating her supply records. Jake was drinking his morning coffee when Torres suddenly sat up straight. His face went pale as he pressed his hand against his earpiece. "Captain," Torres said, his voice shaking. "I'm getting emergency signals from the inner system, multiple distress calls." Jake set down his coffee cup and walked to Torres's station. "What kind of distress calls?" Torres's fingers moved fast over his controls. "It's the main battle fleet, sir. Admiral Kate Henderson's group. They're under attack near Mars." Parker looked up from her weapons console. "Attack? By who?" "Pirates don't have ships that can take on the main fleet." Torres shook his head. "No, sir. This isn't pirates. The signals are saying alien ships. Big ones. Really big ones." Jake felt his stomach drop. Humanity had met other alien species before, but they were all peaceful traders or explorers. No one had ever attacked human space. "Put it on the main screen," Jake ordered. The viewport changed to show a communication display. Admiral Henderson's face appeared, but the image was broken and full of static. Behind her, Jake could see smoke and flashing lights. "This is Admiral Henderson to all human ships," the Admiral said. Her voice was hard to hear through the interference. "We are under attack by unknown alien vessels. They have superior technology. We need immediate assistance. All ships respond." The message cut out. Torres tried to get it back, but only static came through. "How far are we from Mars?" Jake asked. Parker checked her navigation screen. "About 6 hours at full speed, Captain." Jake thought fast. The Defiance was not a battleship. She was a destroyer, built for patrols and escort duty. But she was the closest human ship to the battle. "Set course for Mars." "Maximum speed," Jake ordered. Walsh's voice came through the communication system from the engine room. "Captain, I heard the emergency signals. The engines are ready. We can push them past the safety limits if needed." "Do it, Danny. Get us there as fast as you can." The ship jumped forward as the engines increased power. Jake could feel the vibration through the deck plates. The Defiance was old, but she was still fast when she needed to be. For the next 6 hours, they listened to broken messages from the battle. Most were too damaged to understand, but Jake could hear the fear in the voices. Ships were being destroyed. Good people were dying. Dr. Bell came to the bridge during the journey. "Captain, I've prepared the medical bay for casualties. If there are survivors, we can help them." Jake nodded. "Thank you, Susan. We'll need all the help we can get." As they got closer to Mars, Torres started picking up clearer signals. What they heard made everyone on the bridge go quiet. "The Liberty is gone," came one voice. "The whole ship just exploded." "Their weapons cut right through our shields," said another. "Nothing stops them." "Fall back to Earth," ordered a third voice. "We can't fight these things." Jake knew the Liberty. She was humanity's newest and strongest battleship. If the Liberty was gone, what chance did the rest of the fleet have? "Captain," Parker said quietly, "if these aliens destroyed the Liberty, what can we do? The Defiance has older weapons and weaker shields." Jake looked at his crew. They were scared, but they were still at their stations. They were still ready to fight. "We do our job," Jake said. "We're human fleet officers. When other humans need help, we answer the call." They dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Mars. What Jake saw made his blood run cold. The space around Mars was full of debris. Pieces of human ships floated everywhere. Some pieces were still burning, others were just twisted metal. Jake could see escape pods scattered among the wreckage, tiny lights blinking in the darkness. But what scared him most were the 3 alien ships. They were huge, bigger than anything humanity had ever built. Their hulls were black and smooth with no visible weapons or engines. But Jake could see energy beams shooting from them, bright blue lines that cut through space. When those beams hit the remaining human ships, the ships simply came apart. "My God," Parker whispered. Jake watched as the USS Ranger, a heavy cruiser, tried to fight back. The Ranger's missiles hit the alien ship but did nothing. The alien's shields absorbed the attack like it was nothing. Then a blue beam lanced out from the alien ship. The Ranger broke in half and exploded. "Captain," Torres said, his voice barely a whisper, "I'm not detecting any other human ships, just the aliens and the debris." Jake stared at the destruction. Admiral Henderson's entire fleet was gone. 12 ships and thousands of crew members, all destroyed in a few hours. "Take us into the asteroid field," Jake ordered. "Keep us hidden among the debris. We need to see what we're dealing with." Parker guided the ship carefully through the wreckage. Jake saw bodies floating in space, good people who had died trying to protect humanity. He saw pieces of ships he recognized, vessels he had served on or visited. "Captain," Torres said, "I'm picking up some escape pod signals. There are survivors out there." "How many?" "Maybe 50 or 60 pods scattered through the debris field." Jake made his decision. "We'll rescue as many as we can, but we stay hidden. We can't help anyone if those alien ships find us." For the next hour, the Defiance moved quietly through the wreckage, picking up escape pods. Dr. Bell worked without stopping, treating injured survivors. Each person they rescued told the same story. The alien ships had appeared without warning. They fought with weapons and technology that humanity couldn't match. The human fleet never had a chance. Jake stood in the medical bay, listening to a wounded officer from the Liberty. The man's name was Lieutenant Paul Gray. His left arm was badly burned, but he could still talk. "They knew everything, Captain," Gray said. "Every time we tried a new attack pattern, they were ready for it. Every time we changed our tactics, they countered immediately. It was like they had been studying us for years." "What about their ships?" Jake asked. "Did you learn anything about their technology?" Gray shook his head. "Our sensors couldn't get good readings. Their shields blocked almost everything. But Captain, I've never seen ships move like that. They could change direction instantly, like physics didn't apply to them." Jake left the medical bay with a heavy heart. He found Parker on the bridge, staring at the sensor displays. "Any sign of the alien ships?" he asked. "They left about an hour ago," Parker said. "Sensors show they're heading toward Earth." Jake felt his chest tighten. Earth was humanity's home world, where billions of people lived. If these aliens could destroy the main fleet so easily, what would they do to Earth's defenses? "Captain," Torres called out, "I'm receiving a message from Fleet Command on Earth. It's Admiral Robert Kane." The communication screen showed Admiral Kane's face. The old man looked tired and worried. "This is Admiral Kane to all human ships," Kane said. "Mars' fleet has been destroyed. Alien forces are approaching Earth. All available ships are ordered to fall back to the outer colonies. Do not engage the enemy. I repeat, do not engage. Evacuation protocols are now in effect." The message ended. Jake stood quietly for a moment, thinking about what he had heard. "So that's it?" Parker said. "We just run away and let them take Earth?" Jake looked at his crew. They were waiting for his orders. The Defiance was an old ship with old weapons. Logic said they should follow orders and retreat to the outer colonies. But Jake thought about the people on Earth. He thought about the families and children who couldn't run away. He thought about the duty he had sworn to protect humanity. "Torres," Jake said, "send a message to the survivors we rescued. Tell them we'll drop them off at the nearest safe station." "Yes, sir." "And after that?" Jake looked out at the stars, thinking about the impossible choice ahead of them.